we're going to be using Hama beads. So I don't know, if you've got children and grandchildren, you probably know all about Hama beads. They are these small plastic beads that you put on a grid and melt them into shape with an iron. And if you do have children at home, you've probably spent many hours picking these up off the floor, especially when the box you keep them in has the lid's fallen off and they've fallen all over the place. So I have chosen black Hama beads, all neat in the packaging. And the reason for this is a mummy fail that we were clearing out my daughter's bedroom, and I am absolutely certain I put all her Hama beads and all these grids to one side to use for summer holiday flower arranging club, but then I think I inadvertently took them all to the charity shop, so I've had to go out and buy a fresh pack of beads. And how annoying is that? 1,000 bits of plastic potentially rolling around on my floor again. And what I've chosen, because I was buying them for me, I actually went for black, and the reason for that was that I thought it would show up better when I was filming. But of course you'll be able to use whatever colour you want, and you know, you might go totally random. This would be a really good project to get the children involved in, or you could colour coordinate it. I think if I was doing this out of preference, I would probably have chosen a pink or possibly green, and green is a really great colour to use for anything with your flowers, because green goes with everything. So what I'm going to do here is I've got a jam jar, and we're going to create a grid that sits on top of the jam jar that you can then arrange your stems of flowers through. So I am using the lid off my jar as a template. In fact, I've got a loose bead in there. Putting it centrally over the template, and it's got these little, if you've not seen them before, it's got these little sort of teeth that stand up, and you slide the plastic beads onto the teeth. It's very easy to do, and you might want to subcontract this work if you do have children or grandchildren at home, because it's quite difficult on the eyes. So you could get them to do this. So I'm using the jam jar lid as my template just to start me going. So I am using a circular template here, which makes things a lot easier. Some of the templates you'll find, if you are going to go out and buy, or what you've got at home, is if they are squares, it's much harder to make a circle shape. So once I know which line I'm going on, I can just keep going through. So if you've only got a grid that is a square, you'll need to be a bit more inventive as to how you mark out your shape. And you may have to do a square, but it might be a square. You may have to, in working on your circle, the actual shape might be more pointed at the edges. It might be, you know, jaggedy around the edge, but basically a circular shape. Or you could just, for ease, go with the square. But I would always say, if your jam jar's got, you know, a rounded opening, I would follow that rounded opening. But there's nothing to stop you doing a square, or if you're going to be really ambitious, a star shape, or I know there's also hearts you can get. So it's up to you. So as you can see, it's quite a little smile there. Painstaking work. So here I am going on my second layer inside. And as a way of using up some of these Hama beads at Christmas, before I donated them to the charity shop, I took out all the white ones and I made Christmas decorations, really stars, and tried to do it, instead of those sort of multicoloured coasters that the children end up making for you at playgroup and school, just to try and finesse the idea a little bit, and made more elegant stars, which work really well as Christmas decorations and little charms on my Christmas presents as well. So what I've done here, 2 complete circles using the lid as a guideline. So that means it'll balance on the top of my rim of the jam jar. I then need to create a grid to arrange my flowers through, and again, you can be as creative here as you want to be. What I'm going to do is put one in the middle, and I'm just going to keep it simple, and I'm going to make spokes of, as if they were spokes of a bicycle, or mimicking an orange being cut in half. down for the middle, up to the top. You need to have in mind what kind of flowers you're going to use, because you need to make sure these holes that you're creating are going to be big enough to put your flowers through. So I have actually gone out and bought some stems from a florist that's recently opened in town. And looking at the flowers I've chosen, the stems were quite chunky. But if you knew you were going to be using thinner flowers that you could go through, for instance here, I've gone halfway through, but I could, and I'm not going to do it now because I know I won't get the bead out, but I could, for instance, put an inner circle going around here. So in that half I would have, so from the 3 openings, I would have 6 little openings. So trial and error. So I've been very geometric with my layout here, and to keep it simple if you don't know what you want to do, but you could do it more free form if you wanted. So it's entirely up to you. So on my last few beads, so here I've transferred my hammer beads on their templates. They're still all loose on the board onto my ironing board. And then you need to have a piece of greaseproof paper. And if you're buying the kit, I think sometimes you get this piece of paper inside, but it is just a piece of greaseproof paper or baking parchment. Spread that out over your beads, and then take an iron that's been on a cool setting and hold it down in place. So I tend to hold it in place for about, I don't know, 5 or 10 seconds, and then go round in a little sort of mushy kind of, trying to push them into place. Probably mushy isn't the right kind of word, but you can see here that these beads have started to melt and fuse in place, but I need to do a bit more work here. So I shall come over the other side. So still need to do a bit more. So that looks as if they have all melted. Like that. And in fact, you can see here that the ones I originally melted, they're getting quite hot to touch. They've squashed quite a bit, whereas these ones still look quite whole. I'm just going to turn it round and just get the same amount of heat on the other side. The more you do this, the more skilled you will become in fusing the beads just the right amount. I will show you when I take the paper away what they look like. So the paper will peel off. So it's all stuck in the grid. And then you need to, sometimes it will just fall away. You need to gently ease it off the board. And this is quite warm. So if you are getting the children to help you, you do the ironing bit. Oh. Okay. So you can see there, these bits have really fused, whereas some of the other bits are only more lightly bonded together, and you can see the hole through them. I'll then, and comparing that to the other side, this is pretty much as they were put in. So just to make sure they are all bonded on that side, I'm just going to do a light iron on the top. I prefer them, beads, to be, I like the fact they still look like the whole beads. So I'm going to have this on my jar this way up, rather than that way up where they have all melted into each other. So again, it's all personal choice. And just leave that to go cool. So the idea being that when you get your jam jar, you put that onto the jar, and then you can arrange your flowers through it. So the problem with this again is much like the clay frog we made, that it is just balancing. You can see I need to let that cool and go flat a little bit. So it may well slip off. So in my best blue piece away, I'm going to show you one that I've made earlier. And this is when I went a little bit more fancy. So here, when I thought I was going to be using smaller stems, I made small holes. And then I went through and made what looked like little bangles. Using the jam jar as a template, I just did, focus, one row of beads. And what I thought that would do, if I glued those together, the two pieces there, and glued here as well, that would effectively make myself a very fancy top for my jam jar. And as I was working on that, I don't know if you've seen the video I've done yet with the beads. Lean across and switch my iron off. That's the beads I stored my beads in a plastic peanut butter jar with a plastic lid, and it crossed my mind, imagine this is plastic. But what I could have done was with a hot skewer, heated the skewer up in a flame and pierced it through the lid. And that would be another way of creating a frog, and you'd have the frog that would fit and screw onto your own jar. So anyway, I've gone to the trouble of making these two little bangle areas to become the side of my lid. They were quite difficult to make in the sense it's quite hard to fuse a single lot of beads in there, so they have gone quite flat. You can see that clearly. So on the side here, I'm just going to move my iron out of the way. I have got hot glue guns. So hot glue guns, great fun to use. It's been heating up for a while, and the idea was that I would drizzle a small amount of glue around the edges. So this is the deluxe version, really. You could just do the flat frog and it would work out perfectly fine. Push the next one on top. They're sandwiched together. You can just see the trail of glue here just starting to set. And oh, got my finger caught in there. And then this one's going to go on the top. I did this, and this is where I did a little decorative detail on the edge. You can glam them up as much as you like, and rather annoyingly, and I've just got a glue on the knobbles on the edge, the size that I made the rings. So it's all trial and error. So you can make a really simple frog first of all, a grid, and then once you've got the idea, you can move in quite quickly. I don't want this glue to dry before I've got a chance to push it down on top. You get more adventurous once you've tried the technique out, and that has held really, really well. So you can just see the bits of glue here. But sometimes when you see the glue, it's you that's seeing it because you're the one that's made it. Anyone else looking casually may well not notice there's bits of glue, and as the glue dries, here you can pull away the bits being seen, so it's quite easy to clean up your work afterwards, but I don't think anybody would notice there's tiny bits of glue showing there. And in any event, once you've got your flowers in your jar, it's going to cover up any imperfections. And the point being, you've home crafted it. It doesn't need to be perfect. So finishing off the project with adding flowers, you can see here this is the grid I made in advance with quite small holes for arranging slim stemmed flowers through. And then my two discs of Hama beads that's given me this rim around the edge. So it will fit onto my jar as if it was a replacement lid. And then the grid I'm going to use today, which has got bigger holes on it, and it's just going to rest on the grid like that. And I notice there's a little bit of a kink there. And I could go back actually and iron that down again if I wanted to. But sometimes, you know, it's nice to have things that you've made yourself. They're not always going to be perfect and you know, look as if they've come direct from the factory. And these are, in close-up, the lovely Eucharis lilies. And one of these lilies, I bought them a couple of days ago, and you can see that this one here has gone over or is dying. And what I need to do here is just pinch that carefully out of the main stem, so I'll get rid of that one, and then I'm left with the other flowers. So on here I've got two more full buds blooms to enjoy and this little bud here. And on the other one, there's 2 buds and 2 blooms as well. And then, trick here for learning how short to cut your flowers, because obviously they're on really long stems here. They must be 30-40 centimetre long stems, and in reality I'm only going to want them as short as my jam jar. If I wiggle my camera back a bit, move the jar to the edge of the table, and then let the flower stem fall down the edge of the table here until I've got it the height that I want. So you can see there, it tells me where to cut my flower stem. So I just measure it up. And the reason I have to move to the edge of the table is that you can't, if you're doing it on the table, you can't get your flower stem to bend to do that measuring. So, or you could just lift it up in front of you. But it's quite a good trick to move everything to the edge of the table. So I know that I need to be cutting my stem where my fingers are. So we recut the stem the correct length, and we do that at an angle. It's a really good example showing all this sort of juiciness in the stem, and at an angle, so it's a greater surface area for picking up water, and then that will sit in there like that. And I might put the other stem in there as well. So it's a flower that drapes over the edge, this particular one. And as I'm happy with the length of that, then take my next flower and measure it up and cut it the same length. Those. I might even try putting those in the same little hole. Just getting them to balance right so I could interweave the flowers together. And this would look really good to have on the side where you're looking at it from a distance, because the flowers naturally are draping over the edge of the pot. If you look down on top of it, all you're seeing really is it's sort of everything's fallen out and open. Now, if you wanted to use these stems and make your arrangement really modern, you know, if you were using gerbers in this kind of arrangement, sometimes with those long straight stems, they could be artistic elements in their own right. And again, it depends what your look is. If you were going very country cottage, you'd say probably this wasn't the right way of doing things. But if you were going a bit more modern, this would really, really suit gerbers. I can get another stem in there. Not going to work. But it would be a good way of using up every single bit of the flower that you bought. So probably I'll take those out, because I think that my flower is so pretty and delicate on its own that probably those straight, geometric, more contemporary stems are at odds with what I've got there. But it's a trick to use, and I would certainly, if you're going to buy some gerber to do this project, I would certainly have a go at reusing your gerber stems as well. And this was my frog where I had effectively created an alternative jam jar lid, but I didn't show you what flowers I put in. So what I did was put a blue thistle in and some sedum heads that were just coming into bud. And these flowers here are what I'm calling my focal flowers. They're the ones that your eye is drawn to automatically. And then I have a little sprig of the native geranium, which over the few days that have passed, the flowers have gone over, so I'm going to pick those petals off because they look a bit dead. Some buds of hypericum, so that's from the Rose of Sharon, which is the really bright yellow flower. I think it's got about 5 petals, quite often grows as a shrubbery kind of flower. And then a head of fennel, which you've seen me use a lot, and something else in the garden. I wonder whether it might be thyme, I'm not quite sure. But I've placed that together, just all hanging through the frog. So I've pushed them through. This is the frog I made with, had lots of the smaller holes. Whereas when I came to use my white flowers, I ended up making a frog that had bigger holes because I knew the stems of my flowers were that much thicker. But it's just a really pretty way of displaying just a few flowers